Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Well, here we are in the Scottish Highlands. It has some really spectacular landscapes, rolling hills, green pastures, and fresh air.
Well, I see that you've really gotten into the swing of things with your kilt and bagpipe.
Well, you've got a pretty knee or two showing there, my friend. Got underwear under that?
Yeah, well, you'll never know, big boy. But let's be a bit more serious, if that's possible. We need to carry on in the search for clues involving Scotland's most documented UFO landing of all time. And we have the key investigator with us tonight. This, Tim, is a landmark case.
Well, I'm really excited about that. Well, I was just about to look for the Loch Ness Monster, but I guess we should get back to KCR Radio Studios in Las Vegas, and you can introduce our guest for this evening.
All right. I was looking forward to meeting the Loch Ness Monster, too. Oh, well.
Oh, I hear that freaks you out.
Only if I was swimming in the water. I would never go into and swim in a lake, say like Loch Ness or Lake Champlain that allegedly has a monster. It's just the thought of something like that brushing up against me in the dark water. Ugh.
Well, it's dark, cold, and full of sea debris or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, we'll find out more about Pete. All right, we'll find out more about it. We'll find out more. Now, I've been to Loch Ness myself, didn't see anything, but our guest tonight has quite a story about Loch Ness. But I think we want to start off with the UFO material first.
Sure. Well, our guest tonight, and I'm really pleased that we were able to get him to come on our program tonight, is Malcolm Robinson. Now, Malcolm is a prolific lecturer and is famous for his lively and somewhat theatrical presentations on UFO and other inspirational topics. Now, he's spoken extensively in England, Scotland, and Ireland. Now, Malcolm was the first Scotsman to give a lecture on UFOs in America when he lectured at the 18th Annual International UFO Conference in Laughlin, Nevada. That was in 2009. He's also one of only a handful of people on the planet who could say that they've been down to the depth of over 400 feet when he went down in a submarine in Loch Ness back in 1994. He's a brave man. I would never do that. Malcolm says that he's been interested in the strange world of UFOs and the paranormal for as long as he can remember. And in 1979, he formed his own research society entitled Strange Phenomena Investigations. Now, since forming this society, he's since moved down to Hastings in East Sussex, where he has started up a sister branch to SPI entitled Strange Phenomena Investigations England. Now, Malcolm has appeared on numerous television programs and documentaries around the world, and he's also the author of such books as The Monsters of Loch Ness, Paranormal Case Files of Great Britain, Volumes 1 and 2, UFO Case Files of Scotland, Volume 1 and 2, and his most recent, the Dechmont Woods UFO Incident. So, Malcolm, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
It's a pleasure to be here, Tim. Absolutely fantastic. Nice to be here.
Well, you know, this is an interview that I have been a chat. We don't like to call them interviews. This is just a little chat we have here in our living room once a week. But I've read up on this particular case for a number of years, and it's probably one of the most fascinating, and I think, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most documented. But before we get into the case itself, did you have a UFO sighting or anything that led you to get interested in this? I mean, You just didn't obviously wake up one morning and decide I'm going to be a UFO or a paranormal investigator.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I've always had this fascination for all things weird and wonderful. Ever since I was a small boy growing up in Scotland, I had this deep fascination for ghosts, poltergeists, UFOs, lake monsters. And as I grew older, I decided to pursue these fascinating subjects. And I threw myself very deeply and got embroiled in all these wonderful subjects. I've travelled the length and breadth of Britain, interviewing various people who have told me some fascinating tales. And so it's been a combination of, just being very, very interested as a young boy. And then just, as I say, throwing myself into this wonderful arena. Because science, science doesn't know it all. We're learning all the time. And just because something looks and sounds ridiculous doesn't mean to say that it is so. And so the challenges of ufology, of the paranormal sciences, are there to be looked over and analysed. And I'm just pleased that my journey has taken me all over the world, speaking to some fascinating people. And of course, the big case was the Dechmont Woods encounter, which obviously I'll be telling you about shortly. So for me, there clearly is something very real, very tangible occurring in the skies of this world, which absolutely demand investigation. And I just wished more scientists would get involved with this subject. But having said that, it's a big jigsaw. There's pieces of this puzzle spread out all over the world. Researchers like myself, Philip Mantle here in England, and various other researchers are nesting together these very important cases and trying to see what picture it portrays. So it's just a fascinating journey, absolutely.
Now, you got involved in this case, I think right from the beginning. Weren't you one of the first investigators?
Yes, I was. I was one of about 4 or 5 investigators, but I certainly had hands-on experience with this case. I have interviewed the witness, Robert Taylor, many times. I was there at the location a few days afterwards, so I saw the actual physical ground marks that was left by something, which we'll come to in a moment. So I saw that and the police investigation, and I just realised, because I was a very young investigator at the time,
What year was the what date was the actual event?
Yeah, it happened on November the 9th, 1979. And then I was probably about 22 years of age then. So it was my first big case. And, at that time, I thought that maybe all cases were like this. How wrong was I? This is just one of those cases in a million that come along and absolutely tax your brain as to what is the answer. What did this gentleman see that eventful morning? And I'm pleased to say that, there's quite a lot that I'll be speaking about tonight about that case, yes.
Now, he was a forestry worker, was he? Or how did the event start out?
Well, yes, he was employed by the Livingston Development Corporation in the forestry department. He was a foreman forester, and part of his duties were to ensure that no cattle or sheep strayed into the woods and got lost. A very mundane job. He had done it most of his life, and he had absolutely no interest whatsoever in UFOs. He had read about it, of course, in newspapers, but he had no interest. He was just a normal man just wanting to do his job. But all that changed. All that changed on that eventful morning of November the 9th. So he drove into part of the woods, Dechmont Woods, in his pickup truck. And he was accompanied on this ride with his Irish red setter dog Lara to keep him company. He alighted from the truck. He started walking down this forestry path, as he's done many times before. The path leads out into a clearing in the woods. And there, sitting about 40, 50 feet in the air above this clearing, was an object. And he just couldn't imagine what it was. He was absolutely gobsmacked. Here was this dome-shaped object with a large flange going around its perimeter, and parts of the object seemed to disappear. It would reappear, disappear. You could see the young trees in the background. And his dog, Robert Taylor's dog, was barking very, very furiously at this thing. And the witness, Mr. Taylor, standing there transfixed. He just couldn't take his eyes off what he was looking at. Then suddenly, what resembled 2 Second World War sea mines, those spherical balls with the spikes that was mined in the North Atlantic during the Second World War, similar to that. 2 of them dropped down very, very forcibly from the underside of this hovering object and hit the grass. As soon as it hit the grass, it made a thudding sound. Then the 2 of them started to roll across the grass towards Bob Taylor, and he's looking at this, his eyes are fixed on these 2 objects. What the hell is going on here? Then he stopped. Then he suddenly projected these rod-like projections towards his person, grabbing him very, very forcibly at both hips and pulled him towards this larger object. And at this point, Bob remembers a horrible smell, a horrible burning smell, which pervaded the whole area, a very corrosive, rasping, burning smell. And he also heard a swishing noise. And at that, he lost consciousness. When he regained consciousness, the larger object was gone, the smaller objects were gone, and there were between 30 and 40 depressions, marks in the grass, ladder-like, track-like marks, circular indentations, triangular indentations. He had a nasty graze on his forehead, a graze under his chin. His trousers were torn, his jersey was all muddy, and he started to crawl back to his departmental pickup truck, which was about, maybe 600-700 yards away down the forestry path. He tried to radio base to call his colleagues, but he found that he couldn't speak. And then he reversed the truck into a ditch. He was really all over the place. His coordination, something had happened, and the truck was reversed into a ditch, which he sadly couldn't get out. He then managed to walk the 1/4 mile to his home, a small village in Deans. Deans is a small village near Livingston, Newtown in central Scotland. And when his wife saw him, she went, "My God, what's happened to you, Bob?" And he said, "I've been attacked." You've what? You've been attacked? By what? And he said the immortal words, he says, the only words you could say was, "By a spaceship." And his wife says, "Oh, Bob, come in. There's no such thing as a spaceship. Come in. I'm going to phone the doctor." So Bob then went into the family home, and he kept going on about a strange smell. And his wife says, "Well, I can't smell anything, Bob." "Well, I can smell this." She phoned the local doctor, a local GP, attended the family home, and they did some tests on Bob. And other than maybe his heart was racing a bit, there were nothing really wrong. He saw the graze under his chin and on his head. And the doctor suggested that they make an appointment for him to go and see a doctor at the local Bangor hospital. So just before that happened, his wife phoned Bob Taylor's boss, the forestry boss, a Mr. Malcolm Drummond. So he then came to the witness's home, and he says, "Okay, Bob, what's going on? What's happened?" So Bob proceeded to tell his boss about this crazy thing that he had seen in the woods. I mean, my goodness me, what's this? And Mr. Drummond, Robert's boss, knew that Bob would never, ever tell a tall tale. He knew he was a salt of the earth. He was a genuine man. There's no way that his employee would concoct such an incredible tale like this. And for what? Why would he want to do that? Anyway, Bob went to the Bangor hospital. He waited an hour. He waited 2 hours and nobody came near him. So he decided to just sign himself off. He just couldn't be bothered waiting, and he discharged himself from the hospital. At that point, Malcolm Drummond, Bob's boss, realised that something serious has just happened here. Robert claimed that he was assaulted, so the police became involved and they treated it as a case of an assault by person or persons unknown. Rather than scoff and laugh at this, the police treated it very, very seriously. They went up to the location. They clearly saw these marks in the grass. And about an hour or so later, the area was fenced off to ensure that no members of the public strayed into the area and contaminated the site by their own footprints, etc. The following day, I managed to get up to the Deans. I sat with Robert Taylor in his home. And
how did you hear? How did you hear about the case? Did it get immediate press attention?
It most certainly did, yeah, Tim. As it was all over the Scottish news, and it was through the Scottish news that I learned about the case, and I quickly got in touch with Robert Taylor. He invited me to his home the following day, and I conducted a taped interview with him. And his home was awash with journalists, TV people. They realised that this was a big ongoing story. And that same day, we went up to the woods, my colleague and myself, and we met Robert Taylor there with a couple of English UFO investigators. And that's where we took plaster of Paris molds of the indentations in the grass, which were clearly there. And so the story goes that Robert says, look, this is what I saw. I'm not imagining it. This truly happened to me. And it was one of the most bizarre cases in ufology in Scotland to date. And it's one of these cases that I felt desperately needed a book on its own to tell, because since that incident in 1979, Tim, there have been 11 different theories to try and explain the case.
I know that some of them are just so outlandish. Well, let's go over a couple of them. The one that I put high on the list of being somewhat hilarious is the fact that he ate poison or tainted berries.
Yes, that's correct. A chap called Dave Slater decided to come up with this theory that Robert Taylor ingested Atropa belladonna, which is a poisonous berry, and taken in high doses can kill you. And even if you rub the juices, squeeze the juices in the palms of your hand, your hands will, that will go into your skin, through the skin, etc. And I asked Bob about this. I said, Bob, have you ever taken berries that maybe you shouldn't? And he says, Malcolm, not at all. He says, those berries don't even belong in Dechmont Woods. And I checked through various societies to ask them, is it possible that Atropa belladonna, these poisonous berries, do they exist? Or can they be found in Dechmont Woods? And everybody says, no, they can't. So that kind of blew that theory out the water. But Mr. Slater went on to say that at that time in 1979, there was only about 3 or 4 television stations, and ITV and the Independent Television Network were on strike. So there was only one television show at the time, the BBC One, and it was showing Doctor Who, an episode called The City of Death. Now, in that particular programme, Tim, there was a similar object to what Robert Taylor saw. But very briefly, I asked the family, I asked Bob, have you ever watched Doctor Who? No. He's no interest in it whatsoever. So that wouldn't have been the kind of catalyst for him, yeah.
Also, too, there is a gentleman that you quote extensively in the book who said that he had seen nothing more unusual than a water tower that existed across the highway.
Yeah, we have a gentleman called Phil Fenton who believes that Robert Taylor wasn't where he said he was. He was at the other side of the motorway where there's more woods, but there's a water tower there, which admittedly on the top does look kind of similar to what Robert Taylor saw. But I mean, Robert maintains that he was not there at all. I mean, the marks in the grass are on the other side of the motorway and nowhere near that other location. And it's quite a whimsical, fanciful story from Phil Fenting, who states that he was on the other side of the motorway. He most certainly wasn't. But the thing is, Tim, that we have to give credence to anyone who would come up with a reasonable explanation, because it's in every single investigator's mindset to look over the fence, look at the other side of the coin, take on board the skeptic's point of view and analyse that, as we have done in the book, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any particular explanation that you might give some credence to?
Well, I mean, possibly a medical condition, although I don't fully subscribe to that. I don't fully subscribe to that, I must say. Maybe a mini stroke, etc., to cause some form of hallucination. But there was another Scottish researcher said that Robert saw a mirage of Venus. Can you imagine? You know,
that's
and also
Venus comes down. Venus comes down so low that it leaves markings on the ground now, I suppose. Yeah.
I know. I mean, that is kind of hilarious. And that he also saw black ball lightning. That was maybe some form of army testing of a military small helicopter. I mean, I've heard quite a lot of theories, but for me personally, Tim, I believe that Bob, for some reason, entered into an area which either was right for him or wrong for him. You know, he was in the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time. But I believe Bob saw something not of this world, something which maybe was dimensional, which flitted into that area of the woods very, very quickly, yeah.
But of course, he did also have the rip in his pants. How big was the actual tear?
Yeah, I mean, there's two different size tears, just over 2 inches long on both sides of his trousers. Now, these were analysed by the forensic department of the police in Edinburgh in central Scotland. And the police forensic man says that these trousers were not ripped by barbed wire fencing. They were not ripped by any forest debris like sharp stones or sharp twigs. These trousers, in his opinion, was ripped in a mechanical manner upwards. Now, I've got these trousers here in my home. They are heavy-duty material, and it takes quite a lot if you were to rip those trousers. So that kind of enhances the theory that something happened, yeah.
All right, gentlemen, we need to go to our bottom of the hour break. So when we come back, we will continue our conversation with Malcolm Robinson on exploring the bizarre. So stay tuned.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to the second segment of Exploring the Bizarre. Tonight we're talking with Malcolm Robinson and his investigation into this fascinating case in Scotland in 1979 with a forestry worker who really, for no fault of his own, accidentally ran across a UFO while on his job. Now, Malcolm, before we had to go on our break, you were talking about the condition of his trousers, which had a rip, and you were saying that an analysis of this rip showed that this was something that, I mean, that the tear happened, did you say upwards, and obviously by mechanical means?
Yes, absolutely. The police forensic chap was absolutely convinced that these trousers were torn in some kind of mechanical manner. I mean, this chap had been involved with murders, with assaults, with damaged clothing for a whole range of crimes. And here he was, subjected to these trousers, which he had to give a professional opinion. And so he honestly felt that, yeah, these trousers were ripped mechanically as opposed to, anything else.
What really interests me about this case is how the police department really took this seriously. I mean, they didn't go and say, "Oh yeah, Robert, you're drunk, go home," or anything like that. They really took to heart what he said happened, actually happened to him.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's the only UFO case in the British Isles that's been the subject of a criminal investigation. So that in itself tells you how serious that the Scottish police treated this case. And there was quite a substantial amount of police officers who looked at this case. Quite a few people were involved in it. And I've interviewed 2 or 3 police officers, and they were absolutely baffled. And I'm so pleased that they didn't poo-poo the story, that they treated it seriously. They interviewed some of Robert's friends and family, and they clearly saw that the gentleman who had this experience was just a normal chap, he had no airs and graces. He was not up to telling fanciful tales. Like I said at the start of the show, he had no interest in UFOs or the paranormal. He just wanted to do his job, get paid, and have an evening out with his friends and family. But that morning changed his whole life, And he sadly passed away in 2017. But before he did so, I used to keep in contact with him. And he says, "Malcolm, I always remember it. I'm never going to change my mind on what I saw. People may laugh, they may scoff, they may have all their theories. They were not there." He says, "I was there, I saw this thing." And out of all the hundreds of people I've spoken to and interviewed over the years, Tim, he is one of the best persons that have convinced me of the sincerity of a genuine human being who's had a genuine experience. Don't get me wrong, people can lie. People can lie under lie detectors and condition their body as such to give all the correct signals. But, we had his testimony, we had the marks in the grass. Skeptics have said that maybe the marks in the grass were left by some pipes which were being moved about in the forest 2 weeks prior to that. An investigation uncovered that the forestry department did not have any pipes or any materials lying in that patch of woods in the clearing on that day or on that week leading up and after the experience. Neither were there any kind of those big caterpillar, tractor things that can leave marks in the grass. None of those were in the area at the time as well. And one of the police officers said that something had clearly came down and then went straight back up, because there were no similar marks in the grass anywhere else to be found in the woods on that day. And we had, we tramped all over the woods. The surprising thing is that the actual location is maybe only about 200 to 300 yards away from a busy motorway which runs into Edinburgh. But the thing we have to bear in mind is that it's a very dense forest. So, I mean, it's great camouflage for anything that may have happened on that occasion. So, yeah, it's very mysterious.
Now, have you looked into if there had been any reports of UFO sightings in the area before the incident and then afterwards?
Absolutely, Tim, yes. And research uncovered a number of different people within about a 5-mile radius of those woods who claimed to have seen strange objects in the sky on the weeks leading up to that initial encounter. These objects did not conform to any conventional helicopters or aircraft of any description whatsoever. Some of them were disc-shaped, oval-shaped, traversing the sky at terrific speeds, stopping, moving, and moving away very, very quickly. And thankfully, we have people, witnesses on record, they're mentioned in my latest book, who have come forward and put their name and paper and say, we can back Mr. Taylor up. Now, of course, it may not have been the same object. We can surmise and speculate, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But thankfully, we have, as you mentioned there, we have other witnesses in the weeks leading up to the actual sighting. And that's what makes it all the more special, I guess, yeah.
Now, as for Robert himself, did he have any other experiences afterwards, and not just necessarily UFO experiences? I mean, as you well know, a lot of times somebody who has had a close encounter with a UFO may then have a paranormal type of experiences that can last their entire life. Anything like that happened with Robert afterwards?
Well, surprisingly not, because we did ask that question. You're quite right, Tim. Sometimes it's the case that when people have these wonderful, or some would say wonderful, some would say not, experiences, that they have a paranormal experience, or they may see ghosts or things happen in the family home. Not with Robert. However, I can say that Robert's daughter, she had a black car following her a few weeks after the incident, and blacked out windows, etc. Now, that might not mean anything, but that was strange, and his daughter thought it was very strange. So I don't know if that's connected or not. But one thing that was quite interesting, Tim, was that a few years later, a good few years later, 1990, Robert Taylor left his home in Deans and relocated to another beautiful Scottish village called Blairgowrie. And would you believe it? Crop circles were found about a quarter of a mile away from his home. 2 crop circles were found. Now, whether, again, that's a coincidence or not, people may speculate. For me personally, here in the UK, I mean, I firmly believe that the vast majority of crop circles are indeed man-made. I know a lot of people who make them. What I can't explain, though, Tim, for crop circles is these balls of light which descend from the sky and weave in and out of the crop fields. These have been filmed, they've been photographed, they've been seen. And even one of my friends who makes crop circles, he says, Malcolm, we were making a crop circle one night, and then suddenly we saw this figure, and it was late at night, it was dark, and they saw this figure standing at the edge of the field, and they went, oh God, we've been rumbled, we've been found out, oh no. So they walked towards, thinking it's maybe a farmer. So as they're walking towards this silhouette, this figure at the edge of the field, he completely disappeared in front of them. So even the skeptics, or even the crop circle makers who make these things, have told me that there's paranormal, anomalous phenomena going on when they make these crop circles. That's not to say that, UFOs can make crop circles. I'm not saying that. I can only really speak for what's going on in the UK. But getting back to Bob and Blairgowrie, it was quite interesting that 2 crop circles formed about a quarter of a mile from his new home. Yeah.
Well, I suppose the question is, had there been a past history of crop circles in that area before he moved there?
A good point again. And the answer to that one is no. Not at all. None at all, no.
Interesting. Well, and I find the fact that his daughter was followed after the fact by a car with black car with blacked out windows. When, we've heard that type of story time and time again, and I sincerely doubt, though, that Bob or his daughter would have had any knowledge of this type of activity going, surrounding UFO witnesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we do our investigations, Tim, we put everything out there. We've even tried psychometry on Robert Taylor's trousers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, psychometry, I'm sure all your listeners are well versed in this, but for those who are not, psychometry is a psychic gift that people can hold a watch or a ring from someone, maybe someone's deceased, and they suddenly get all these pictures in their mind and information coming to them. So we decided to use some good psychics to see if perhaps, big perhaps, if they could hold Robert's trousers and see if anything might come into their conscious mind. And just recently, earlier this month, I spoke at a big psychic convention in the town of Bournemouth in England. And I gave the trousers were in a polythene bag, and then they were in another polythene bag, so you didn't know what was in there. If you held it, you would know it's maybe clothes because it was squidgy. And I gave these trousers to a psychic, and I says, "Can you tell me? Can you get any? What is it? I can't tell you what it is, but can you tell me what you get out of this?" And this is what she got, guys. This is what she got. "Oh, I don't like this. I'm getting swaying. There's a heaviness. There's a bright light. Oh my God. There's something coming from a different place, and I'm getting a jolt. Oh my God. I'm getting a sick feeling. Oh, I don't like this. And then I'm getting sparking in fingertips. I'm getting tingling in my. What is this?" And I told her what she was holding. And so we took the trousers out of the bag, and her face was white, she's like, "My God." So that was interesting, Now, psychometry is just a tool. Maybe I don't know if people should use it or not, but for us, at least it gives us something. It may not necessarily be true. She may have been reading my mind. She may have been getting this from I don't know where, but she didn't know what was in those polythene bags. She knew it was probably an item of clothing because, it's soft, etc. But that was interesting as well. Yeah.
It's very, very interesting. Now, as for Bob himself, afterwards, during his actual encounter and just immediately afterwards, he had, you said that he had trouble walking, he couldn't talk. Did he feel like that he had any, say, like residual health problems afterwards that carried on not only in the weeks and months, but possibly that followed him around the rest of his life?
No, it's a very good question. It's a question that should be asked. Did that impact? Did anything impact on Bob's health after that encounter? Not really. Is the answer to that one. He was 61 years of age when the incident occurred, and he retired several years or a few years later. No, he had issues with. Just the occasional small health issue, but nothing untoward, nothing that was really came from interacting with something from goodness knows where. Because we do know in other ufology in the literature, if you get close to some of these craft, call them what you will, sometimes, not always, sometimes it may impact on your health, etc. But thankfully on this occasion, nothing really impacted on Robert's health other than just your normal, you get older, your body lets you down anyway, and so yeah, just nothing really, no.
Now, the research that I've done over the years on cases like this, I don't think that I have run across anything that really comes even close to being similar to this incident. Possibly the only case that, and I can't remember all the details, was a witness who saw what he called like walking tin cans came out of a landed UFO. He said that looked like that they were walking on like little fins that came up and looked like that it seemed like that they looked at him and then went back into the ship. But have you run across anything that even comes remotely close to in being similar to this case?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of illustrations in my latest book on the case. There was a UFO sighting in England several years ago, which resembled what Robert Taylor saw, the circular object with the flange going around it. And what that object didn't have was the cross-like propellers that Robert Taylor also saw sticking up from that flange. There was also a sighting of one spiky ball above a small town called Ness here in England that had this sparkling effect coming from one of the prods down to the ground. When I interviewed a couple of English researchers about this case, they told me that there was a case very similar that occurred in South America back in the 1960s, where two objects similar to what Robert Taylor saw, the spiky balls, came from an object, but they exploded. Thank God that didn't explode in this case. That would have been terrible. But so in that regard, because at the end of the day, people like myself and my colleagues all over the world were trying to get the pieces of the jigsaw. Did something similar happen? Please tell us. So this is why we write books and do the magazines, to say for someone somewhere to put their hand up and say, you know what, guys, I can tell you about something that we saw. So we're always looking for that other hand to go up and say, guys, we saw this. But I've only came across maybe about 3 or 4 similar since 1979. I've been doing the research. But as we know, guys, the UFOs come in all shapes and sizes, and that's what makes it so damn interesting, and it always will do, I guess.
And you may have mentioned this during the first part of the show, but you said that he had his dog with him during this encounter. What happened to the dog afterwards? I mean, was the dog still with him when he woke up?
I do love your questions, yes. The dog was there. It was in a distressed state, and needless to say, because its master was lying prone on the ground, unconscious. We don't know how long Robert Taylor was unconscious when these ball-like things grabbed him. He had the smell, etc. But I've learned, whilst writing this book, something that I didn't know before. And that is that the Robert Taylor's dog didn't leave the family home for months. Even to go out for the toilet, it didn't leave the family home. And I only learned that whilst researching the book. Surprising that fact never was released to me beforehand. But, so in that regard, that's strange. Now, we could ask further that question by saying, well, were there any health problems to the dog as well? Never mind Bob. Apparently not, other than the fear factor of that dog refusing to leave the family home. And there was another occasion, another person saw a strange shadowy figure in Dechmont Woods. I've got it in the book as well, because we try and find out as many things about the case as you can. And it's great when people come forward to tell you that they saw this kind of shadowy figure in the woods and that just completely disappeared. And we've heard, and I've learned since writing the book, that there have been animals, dogs, etc., family pets, going missing in the going missing in the woods as well. So it would appear maybe there's certain locations on planet Earth, we call them hot spots or window areas, where more stranger things have happened than anywhere else. Now, why should this be? Do we have some magnetic lines? Are they ley lines? Is it an area in Dechmont Woods that crisscrosses, that things have a portal, an opening, an opportunity to be seen to those people? I deal obviously extensively with the paranormal world as well, and you could have six people in a haunted room and only 2 will see a ghost and the other 4 will go, well, I can't see anything. Is it maybe Bob's more psychically attuned for things to happen? I mean, it's all pure speculation on my part, but clearly he stumbled into an area which was either meant for him or not meant for him. either he saw a craft from another world, or, as the skeptics would have us believe, maybe it was a mini stroke that he hallucinated, etc., which with any UFO case we must obviously adhere to and must recognise the importance of hallucinations. But for me, meeting the man, interviewing the police, seeing the marks on the ground, analysing everything, the UFO reports leading up to the week when it happened, it all stems for me that we're dealing with something not of this planet, for me, for sure.
You had talked earlier about using psychometry on his pants. Have you or anybody ever attempted going back to the location, that is, if the location is currently accessible or was at the time, and trying something like that there, take it, or bringing a psychic with you just to see what kind of impressions that they would get from the site?
Well, we have done sky watches in the area on the anniversary of the event, and but nothing much was seen. But a story I can tell you, Tim, was back in 1993, we commemorated this landing, for want of a better word, by the placement of a stone cairn with a metal plaque. And whilst we were there with members of the Scottish press, a psychic that we use extensively on haunted buildings, she was standing facing the woods. And I walked up to her and I says, Helen, yes, are you okay? Don't you see them, Malcolm? What, Helen? I don't know what you're looking at. Oh, Malcolm, look into the woods, look. So I looked into the woods and I couldn't see anything, guys. But she said she saw a red ball, a big red ball about the size of a basketball, weaving in and out of the trees. And then she said that she saw this grey alien face, the classic alien face that Whitley Strieber initially commented on in his own case studies, in the trees. Now, admittedly, I couldn't see that, but I'll tell you what, I would, take that woman for my life. Honestly, God, if she said she saw that, I 100% believe she saw that. She's a wonderful, wonderful psychic. She's provided our society fantastic evidence of life after death and paranormal events. I just wish that I could have saw what she had seen. But maybe my psychic radio, if you like, is not that perceptive to really see a frequency that she can see. Now, again, it's a nice wee story. Do we treat it as honest? Do we treat it as value? I think we should do, because I believe in what she saw, yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to have to go to our top of the hour break here. So when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Malcolm Robinson on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned for more.
Exploring the Bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight we're talking with Malcolm Robinson, and during the break, Malcolm, we got a question wanting to know if Mr. Taylor had, if anybody had attempted hypnotic regression, on him after the case.
Yes, funnily enough, there were. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately because it was a stage hypnotherapist. Which, having said that, I mean, the guy certainly knew his trade. There's no denying that. He clearly was very gifted at what he did. This was not conducted by SPI or society. This was done by more or less the family. And it was a gentleman by the name of Robert Halperin, who was a very, very famous hypnotherapist or stage hypnosis act during the early 80s. And so the story goes that he was taken up to Edinburgh, and he was regressed back to that morning of November the 9th, 1979. And he told the story just as I told you at the top of the show. We were hoping that maybe something else, perhaps maybe something else may have came out of the hypnosis, but sadly, nothing else came out. It was like he had hit a brick wall. There was a dark expanse where he just couldn't go any further. It was like he wanted to say more, but something was shutting him down. And we never really tried hypnosis after that. Maybe we should have, because again, hypnosis is a tool that any ufologist should use on a case. Now, yes, it does have its pitfalls. You can lie under hypnosis. You can please a hypnotherapist. But having said that, it's like a workman going on to a building site. That workman will carry as many tools as he can to get the job done. So hypnosis, if used properly and professionally, can perhaps unlock the subconscious mind to let these hidden memories tumble out. We used hypnosis on another famous Scottish case, and that proved very, very interesting. But so sadly, to answer your question, he only recalled the conscious recall of what happened that morning.
Well, and I know that using hypnosis to try to gain additional memories, from a subject is extremely controversial, especially if you have a hypnotist who is obviously trying to lead their subject. But possibly, in this case, there wasn't anything. He blacked out, and that was it.
Yeah, I always wish that before Robert passed away to spirit, that we would have had another chance to professionally regress him. But then the skeptics would quite rightly say, but Malcolm, come on now. He's learned a lot since that event. He's learned a lot about UFOs. He's tried to find out. And maybe that coloured, if we did try hypnosis, I'm saying, maybe that would colour any secondary hypnotic regression, because he would just be coming out with memories and people talking to him, etc. So that would negate any potential recall, if there were any, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how about this obviously was the most outstanding case that you investigated, and the one was officially looked into by the authorities. What are a couple of other cases that you were involved in that are outstanding in your way of thinking?
Well, clearly one of the biggest ones, I've mentioned this before on other shows, but one of the biggest UFO abduction cases to occur in Scotland occurred in 1992. It's known as the A70 abduction. And it happened to two men who were driving from Edinburgh, the built-up city of Edinburgh, in their car. And they were going to drive late at night, well, about 10:30 in the evening, to see a friend in a small village called Tarbrax. Now, they left the built-up city of Edinburgh, all the big buildings, etc. Then the road took them out into countryside. Very, very desolate, barren countryside. A little cottage here, little cottage there. And as they were driving down this B road, it wasn't a major road, they suddenly saw a two-tiered disc-shaped object hovering about 20 feet above the surface of the road. And just like Mr. Taylor in the Dechmont case, these two men went, whoa, 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 this is not an aircraft. No, this is not a helicopter. What is going on here? Now, rather than stop the car and go back, no, let's keep going. And as their car was directly underneath this hovering object. This object emitted like a silver shimmering curtain of mist, like heavy silver snowflakes, just descended from beneath this object and hit the car. And as soon as that effect hit the car, both men were catapulted into inky and total blackness. They couldn't see their hand in front of their face. They couldn't see the dashboard of the car. They couldn't see each other. My God, where are we? Seconds later, or what appeared to them at least to be seconds later, they regained their sight. The car was shuddering very violently on the road. They managed to control the car, and they drove at breakneck speed to their destination of Tarbrax. They knocked on the occupant's door, who they were going to see, and the lady opened the door and went, "Where have you been? You're an hour and a half late." Now, the journey, guys, should only have taken about 35 minutes, and they're an hour and a half later. They proceeded to tell the occupants of the house about this crazy disc-shaped object hovering above the road. Now, that night and subsequent nights thereafter, they had strange dreams of this grey alien's face coming into their dream world. They then found scars on their body, scars that previously were not there. We all know our bodies. We go in the shower, we know our bodies, and suddenly there were these scoop-like marked scars coming on their body. So Gary Wood decided, he went, "What the hell is this? This can't be one of those stupid UFO stories. What if it is? Where do I go? Do I go to the police? Do I go to the doctor? Who do I turn to?" So he went into the local library and picked out a book about UFOs by the famous British authoress Jenny Randalls. And my contact details were in the back of the book. So I'll cut a long story short. They contacted me by telephone, invited both men to my home in Alloa, which is a small village near Stirling in central Scotland, and they proceeded to tell me this bizarre tale. Now, at that time, I really did advocate the use of hypnotic regression, as I said earlier, as a tool to maybe unlock the mind. And I says, "Guys, would you be happy to go under hypnotic regression and just to see if perhaps something else happened?" Oh, Malcolm, we'll try anything. We really need to know what's going on, because even our wives don't believe us. Our workmates don't believe us. Malcolm, we'll try anything to find out. So we used a qualified hypnotherapist. We gingerly took them back independently to that August evening in 1992, and a typical abduction scenario unfolded. Very briefly, as this silver shimmering effect hit the car, they claim, under hypnosis only, that they were taken out of the car by these small grey beings. And you've had many guests on your show in previous years. Just the very same small grey creatures, 3.5 to 4 feet tall, spindly childlike bodies, grey-blue translucent skin, black inky almond-shaped eyes. And they were taken on board, presumably this craft that they had saw, and stripped naked and subjected to some form of clinical or medical procedure. Gary found himself on a flat raised bed, and he couldn't move a muscle. He could only move his eyes. He was terrified. He desperately wanted to punch one of these little grey guys that was at the side of this bed thing, this platform, but he couldn't. And he said there was a device that was free floating at the top of the room, like a black oval shape, and he was fascinated by this. Then like a can-shaped device rose up from the floor towards his head and started spinning around. And Colin found himself in this other strange chair. He saw these small grey creatures. There were other creatures, call them what you will, on board this craft. And as I said, Gary's wife did not believe him. Until one night, I took a phone call in my family home, and it was Gary's wife. And she says, "Malcolm, can I apologise to you?" I says, "Why?" She says, "Well, I think my husband's off his head. I don't believe this story, but, well, last night, Malcolm, I was lying in my bed next to Gary. Gary was sleeping. I had just finished reading a book, closed the book, put the book on the bedside table, switched the light off, and then suddenly my legs were pulled very, very forcibly down the bed. My head was not on the pillow anymore. My head's in the middle of the bed. And I looked at the foot of the bed, and I saw 2 or 3 small grey creatures holding me by the ankles. And then they realised I could see them, and they just left my ankles, and they just slowly melted through the wall and were gone. And she says, Malcolm,
Well,
I'm so sorry for not believing you, you know.
that's a typical abduction scenario. Any cases involving Nordic-looking aliens, human-looking beings? You know, more what would you say, contactee-oriented cases?
Well, surprisingly, I mean, in all my years since 1979, I mean, I've been interested before that as a youngster. I've never encountered in all my years in Scotland and now in England, I live in England now, of the Nordics, you know, or anything like that. It's always been people who have seen these small grey creatures. And it really annoys me, guys, because why are they doing abductions? That's a big question ufologists the world over wants answered. Is it to repopulate a dying planet by taking sperm and ova from males and females? And why? Why? Because they've been doing it for over 50 years. One would imagine that they have enough samples to do that. Is it they're trying to look into your soul? It's all speculation. I dare say people have their own answers to that, yeah.
How about any incidences of UFOs that supposedly crashed?
Crashed, good question. Nothing major in Scotland for sure that we know about. And, you know, and even the Dechmont Woods one technically wasn't a crash because it was free floating in the sky. I mean, another strange thing about the area in question at Dechmont is some of the trees they're bent towards the left. Now, either that is just subsidence in the soil, or maybe the wind has pushed these trees over, or some people may speculate it's something else as well. And we talked earlier about anything similar to what Bob saw. There was a famous case in Poland, Zdanie, which is mentioned in my book, of a similar object to what Robert Taylor saw, only it was a bright, shiny silver object seen above a farmer's field with the flange going around about it, but again, not with the cross-like projections that Robert Taylor saw on his object coming up from the flange. And so that was quite interesting. But Robert Taylor said that the object he saw was a dark hue texture, like a very dark texture, whereas the Zdanie one was more like silver aluminium. Yeah.
Well, I think that while in the remaining time of the program here, Malcolm, I'd like to bring up one of your other books, because this is a subject that both Tim Beckley and myself have been fascinated about, and that's the Loch Ness Monster. Now, in the talking points that you sent us, you said that at one point you were able to take a submarine down to 400-foot depth into the loch. Now, how did you manage to get yourself into that kind of situation?
Well, it was a wonderful situation for sure. I'll never, ever forget it. It's etched very firmly in my mind. I'll be honest with you, it was nothing to do with our society. There was a submarine at Loch Ness doing some studies of the loch floor, where they had this arm that would go right into the loch floor and pull up samples of the loch floor to find out about the ecology, about, you know, the thousands of years that Loch Ness has been there. So they were offering members of the public for a small period of time, maybe about a week or so, the opportunity to go down in the submarine for £68.50 British money for 1 hour. And so I obviously jumped at the chance. And the submarine was sponsored by Swartz watches. It was a red and white submarine, not yellow. And it was 35 foot in length. If you suffered from claustrophobia, by God, you wouldn't like it, I'll tell you that. There was a front portal in the front nose of the submarine, toughened glass, and there were about 7 or 8 halogen lights on top of that portal. There was a portal in the bottom of the submarine, and it was very, very cramped, all the instrumentation, etc. And the skipper gave us some talk on the safety aspects should anything happen. And then we just careered out from Drumnadrocket. That's part of, it's a small village on Loch Ness side. It's where the Loch Ness Exhibition Centre is housed in a hotel.
I've been there. In fact, right on my wall here, I have a souvenir dinosaur hanging from a string that I got there many years
fantastic
ago. Yeah. Now, how did Steven Spielberg get involved in this?
Well, at that time, I had an idea how we could capture the Loch Ness Monster. And at that time, Ted Danson, the actor, was doing a movie on Loch Ness. And I had a phone call from a Scottish journalist. He says, Malcolm, Ted Danson's doing a movie about Loch Ness. I mean, hypothetically, Malcolm, how would you any ideas how you could capture Nessie? And I went, well, you know what? Funny you should say that. Yeah, I'm working on something right now. Oh, what's that? So if I can ask you and your listeners to imagine a boxing ring, just a normal boxing ring, but only on a bigger scale. That boxing ring would be secreted at the floor of Loch Ness near Urquhart Castle in the bay. Now, on those boxing ring ropes would be spherical balls with radio biopsy darts. Inside this boxing ring would be a device which would be continually turning out a kind of fish puree or an attractant to any big creature in the vicinity. So when any creature, i.e. Nessie, moved towards this area, because it can smell, it can taste this secretion of this fish puree continually being turned out, as it pushed against the boxing ring ropes, if you like, suddenly these spherical balls with the radio biopsy darts would ping out, just like you had a grenade and you're pulling the pin. Bang, bang, bang. They would go into the creature's body, not killing it, but rendering it unconscious. At that point, as the rings of the boxing rings got pushed, lights would go up to the surface boats to let the divers know that something had triggered these ropes. The divers would then go down and track it and capture it. And he went, wow, that's a great idea. Now, he went away. I got a phone call a few days later and he says, Malcolm, you're never going to believe who's interested in your trap and who wants to put money into your trap to make it happen. I went, who? And he went, Steven Spielberg. I went, you're joking. And he says, no, we've been on the phone to him and he's very, very keen to put money up and make this happen. So sadly, as things happen in life, Steven Spielberg went on to do other movies. The plan fell flat. I do believe, guys, that this idea of mine is still a viable aspect to capture the Nessie, because I do believe there's more than one creature in Loch Ness. There would need to be. Sonar is by far the best evidence we have to say that there's objects in Loch Ness in excess of 30 feet. Back in 1987, in Operation Deep Scan, there was a flotilla of boats with the most sophisticated sonar on the planet at that time. And they traversed and swept up and down Loch Ness several times a day. And then on one of these occasions, wow, they managed to get a massive blip on their sonar, which they knew wasn't an anomalous blip from side scan. It wasn't a grouped shoal of fish. It was something real, something tangible, something animate. And they turned the boat round, but by then the object had dived into the depths of Loch Ness and disappeared. So most of the eyewitness testimony at Loch Ness can be discounted, more so from tourists who are there for 5 minutes. And because you get many boats traversing the loch, going one way north, one way south, and they create this standing wave. As the two boats push the water on both ways, the water moves into the centre of the loch, creating these humps. And from a distance, it looks very intriguing. Look at the humps of a monster, but it's just a standing wave. But by that, we still have some very good eyewitness testimony. I've spoken to Father Gregory Brucey, a Benedictine monk at the southern end of Loch Ness who saw Nessie in 1971. He had a friend up from Westminster Cathedral, and they were looking at the loch. The loch was like a sheet of glass, not a ripple. And then suddenly, bang, this long tapering neck with a small head thrust up from beneath the depths of Loch Ness, very agitated, and just plunged back into Loch Ness. Now, here was a man of the cloth telling me this. Now, that's not to say that men of the cloth don't lie or politicians don't lie. We know that. But honestly, that was a fantastic witness. I've interviewed Alex Campbell, the former water bailiff of Loch Ness, who was the first man to report Nessie in the Inverness Courier back in 1934. So the bottom line for me is, yes, there clearly is something very real, very tangible in Loch Ness, same with Lake Champlain, the same way Ogopogo in Canada. And it's a fascination for me as well.
All right. Well, gentlemen, unfortunately, we are rapidly drawing to the end of tonight's program. So, Malcolm, I'd like to let you have it, give you a chance to let our listeners know where they can find you online and where they can purchase your books.
Yeah, if I haven't a website as such, but if you go to Facebook, you'll find me on Facebook, Malcolm Robinson. And my books are available on Amazon and also Lulu as well. And they're Paranormal Case Files of Great Britain, Volume 1, 2, and 3, UFO Case Files of Scotland, Volumes 1 and 2. We talked about Loch Ness. There's a big book on Nessie. And, of course, my latest book. The reason why we do these books is only to let the public know. There's no use in having all this information and filing it away. It's got to go
out. Amen. Amen. That's, we said here we've always got a book in the works. In fact, we have one that just came out this week. It's called Alien Strongholds on Earth. Secret UFO bases exist all around us. And with that, I want to thank you for coming on, Malcolm. It's been a great interview. And if anything comes up there and across the pond that we should know about, please, drop us an email, and we'll have you back on the show. And in the meantime, don't forget to check out the archives for Exploring the Bizarre on KCOR Radio Network and our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO's Secret Files.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.